On my 29th birthday, my husband made me wear a crown that said budget bride turned discount wife. His mother sneered, "Fits you perfectly." I laughed it off while my eyes burned. He handed me a card with no money, just a note, "You could have done better if you tried." 1 week later, he showed up to my book club in tears, whispering, "She's gone and it's my fault." It was a Thursday. Cold, gray, and North Carolina drizzle hanging in the air like a sign no one wanted to let out. I had just clocked out of my shift at Maple and Main, a local antique shop tucked into a corner of downtown Asheville. I was tired. My feet hurt. My back ached from moving an oak sideboard that a customer insisted was just light enough to lift with one hand. It wasn't. All I wanted was a hot shower, some leftover soup, and to be ignored for the rest of the evening. But it was my birthday. And I was married. So I figured there'd be something. A card. A small dinner. Maybe Julian would finally remember the kind of cake I liked. German chocolate, not vanilla. Instead, when I opened the front door of our townhome, the first thing I saw was his mother sitting at our dining table, legs crossed, nails tapping her wine glass like a countdown. Elaine never visited without purpose. The second thing I saw was the crown. Plastic. Glittery. Pink letters that spelled out, budget bride turned discount wife. It was resting on a plate. Like a joke. Or an offering. Julian stood by the sink, scrolling through his phone, totally unfazed. As if this was normal. As if this was funny. "Oh good," Elaine said, flashing that smile she wore like lipstick, loud, bright, and completely fake. "She's home. We were just talking about how much you've adjusted." "Put it on," Julian said without even looking up. I just stood there. Soaking wet from the walk. Key still in my hand. And all I could say was, "What?" He finally looked up and repeated, "Put it on. It's for your birthday." There was no warmth in his voice. No teasing. No kindness. Just expectation. I didn't move. So Elaine reached over, picked it up, and stood. She placed it on my head like she was knighting me for failure. "There," she said. "Fits you perfectly." I didn't speak. If I opened my mouth, I was going to cry. I could already feel the tears rising. Burning. My throat clenched up like a fist. So I did the one thing I learned to do very well in this marriage, I laughed. Quietly. The kind of laugh you give when you want people to believe you're not broken. Julian finally walked over, holding a card. He handed it to me like it was a court summons. Inside, nothing. Just a scribbled note that read, "You could have done better if you tried." I stared at it for a second. Then smiled again, lips trembling. I didn't say a word. I went upstairs, peeled off my clothes, and took the longest shower of my life. Steam filled the room. My tears mixed with water. And I swore, right there, with shampoo still in my hair, that I was done. Here's the thing, when you live under someone else's thumb for long enough, you stop realizing just how small you've made yourself to survive. Julian wasn't always like this. Or maybe he was, and I was just too eager to be loved that I mistook dominance for devotion. When we met, I had just turned 25. My father had died earlier that year, sudden stroke, no warning, and I had moved back to Asheville to help my mom manage the bills. I was working 2 jobs. Waiting tables at a small cafe and managing inventory at a craft store. I had dark circles under my eyes, cracked hands from winter, and no plans beyond next week. Julian walked in wearing a tailored jacket and a grin so smug I could have slapped it off his face. He flirted. I brushed it off. He flirted again. I caved. Our first date was at a rooftop bar I couldn't afford. He paid. I blushed. By the end of the night, he told me I was real, like it was a compliment. We were married 6 months later. Courthouse wedding. Simple dress. A potluck at my aunt's house. Elaine hated all of it. This feels, thrown together, she whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. I suppose that's what happens when you rush things. I let it go. Because I thought love meant tolerance. But tolerance turned to silence. Silence turned into resentment. And resentment? That turned into cruelty dressed up as honesty. By year 3 of our marriage, Julian rarely came home before midnight. He claimed it was work. I stopped asking. I learned to eat dinner alone, sleep curled on one side of the bed, and make myself small enough to avoid comment. When I started going to a local book club, it was the first thing I had done for me in years. Every Tuesday night, I sat with a group of women, most of them older than me, who talked about love, life, grief, and stories that made us feel seen. It was sacred. Julian mocked it. Called it therapy disguised as fiction. I didn't care. And it was that space, that tiny carved-out sliver of life, that gave me the courage to leave. After the birthday crown incident, I didn't tell anyone right away. I needed time. Needed to process. But by Friday night, I packed a weekend bag and drove to my sister's house just outside Weaverville. Nora had cats. A lot of them. Her place smelled like lavender and fur, and I slept better on her lumpy couch than I had in my king-sized bed in over a year. She didn't ask many questions. Just handed me tea and said, "Whenever you're ready." I stayed for 4 nights. On the 5th day, Julian texted once, "Are you coming back?" I didn't answer. On the 6th day, I received another message, "Fine. Take your time." And on the 7th day, the day of my book club, he showed up. It was raining. Of course it was. The kind of rain that soaks your socks within minutes and makes every streetlight look like a watercolor painting. He didn't knock right away. Just stood on the porch, hunched forward, fists in his coat pockets like a boy who got caught stealing. I opened the door and blinked at him. I hadn't seen his face in a week. His eyes were bloodshot. His voice cracked. "She's gone," he whispered. "And it's my fault." I didn't say anything. Not right away. He was dripping on the welcome mat, hair plastered to his forehead, shivering but too proud to admit it. Behind me, the muffled sounds of book club chatter filled the living room, Milton laughing, Denise opening another bottle of red, Sheila arguing about character arcs like she was defending her own life. I wanted to close the door. But something in Julian's face, the way his mouth sagged like all the arrogance had drained out of it, kept me frozen. "She had a heart attack," he said finally. "At yoga. Just dropped." I blinked. "Elaine?" Julian nodded like I'd asked out loud. "They said she was dead before she hit the mat." There was a strange silence between us then, heavy, not with grief, but confusion. I didn't know what to feel. I should have hated her. Maybe I still did. But it's one thing to wish someone would leave you alone, and another to have them leave forever. "She said something to me that morning," he mumbled, eyes fixed on the porch railing. "Before she went to class." He didn't continue. I didn't ask. I stepped aside and let him in. He sat on the far end of the couch like he was scared the wine stains on the throw pillows might burn him. No one said anything for a full minute. Then Milton, bless him, poured a 3rd glass of Merlot and passed it to Julian without a word. Julian took it. Hands trembling. He stayed for the entire session. Didn't speak once. Just sat there like a man who'd misplaced his entire identity and had no idea how to start looking for it. That night, I didn't invite him to stay. He didn't ask. He just walked out the same way he came in, silent, soggy, and smaller than I ever remembered him being. For the next few days, he sent messages. Not long ones. Just fragments. "I know I was cruel. You didn't deserve that. I miss the way things used to be. You were right about everything." At first, I deleted them as soon as they came in. But on the 4th day, something stopped me. I reread the birthday card. "You could have done better if you tried." That phrase haunted me more than I admitted. Because the truth was, I had tried. I tried so hard, for so long, I forgot who I was before trying became my full-time job. And now? Now he saw it too. That card wasn't just a petty jab. It was a mirror. Held up to everything I had been silently enduring, disguised as a joke. Julian came back a week later, this time with a cardboard box. My mother's things, he said. Some of it's yours, actually. I didn't realize until I looked. I opened it later that night. Inside was my old copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God, the one she'd once thrown in a garage sale box because the title sounded depressing. My typewriter. A scarf I thought I'd lost 2 winters ago. And a handwritten recipe in Elaine's delicate cursive. Peach cobbler. She hated desserts. I turned the paper over. No note. No message. Just the recipe. It felt like a truce I hadn't asked for. Julian started going to therapy. I didn't ask him to. He told me anyway. He said he wanted to figure out why he became the man who could watch his wife cry and not feel a thing. I thought being tough made me strong, he said one afternoon while we sat outside at a cafe, just 2 ex-people orbiting what used to be a marriage. Turns out I was just scared. All the time. Of what? I asked. Of being average. Of being alone. Of not being enough. So I made you feel less so I didn't have to feel it myself. It wasn't an excuse. And it wasn't a fix. But it was real. Around this time, I started writing again. Not little journal entries. Not scribbled thoughts in the margins of my books. Actual writing. A memoir, of sorts. I wrote late at night, curled on Nora's couch, cats purring on my feet. I wrote about my childhood. About my parents' love, messy, loud, unwavering. About Julian. About silence. About the crown. I wrote about the moment I knew I'd stopped loving him. And then I wrote about the moment I realized I hadn't loved myself in years. Writing didn't fix me. But it woke me. One day, I brought a chapter to book club. Milton read it out loud. His voice cracked halfway through. Everyone was quiet when he finished. Sheila wiped her eyes with a paper napkin and said, "This is going to help someone." And that was the first time I believed maybe, just maybe, it already had. Julian showed up one morning while I was working at the antique shop. He had another box. "Don't worry," he said. "No more surprises." Inside was the crown. The same glittery plastic one from my birthday. But something was different. The lettering had been peeled off, carefully. In its place, glued on in gold craft letters, were the words, "Full price woman." I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I just looked at it, then looked at him. "You kept it?" I asked. He nodded. It sat in the garage for weeks. Every time I saw it, I felt sick. Then one day, I realized, it was never about the joke. It was about what I let become normal. He handed it to me. "I don't expect anything," he said. "I just wanted you to know I see it now. And I'm sorry it took losing everything to get there." I took the crown. Not because I forgave him. Not because I wanted to give him hope. I took it because sometimes, the weight of an object carries more than its size. And in that moment, it weighed more than anything I'd held from him before. He didn't linger. Just gave me a soft nod and walked back toward his car, the same one he used to blare talk radio from while lecturing me about standards and expectations. But this time, he left without a speech. When I got home that night, I set the crown on my desk beside my manuscript pages. I stared at it for a long time. The absurdity of it. The history trapped in its molded plastic. I thought about how many things I had swallowed over the years. How many jabs disguised as jokes. How many moments I told myself to be cool about it, because I didn't want to be the emotional wife, or the dramatic one. The kind of woman who lets a man laugh while she cries. But I wasn't her anymore. Julian's messages changed. Less apologetic, more reflective. He'd share something small he remembered about us, a trip to the Outer Banks where we danced on the beach. The time I made him soup from scratch when he had the flu and refused to admit it. How he once caught me singing to myself while painting our bedroom and thought I looked free. He said he was reading now. Not just business articles or motivational garbage, but actual books. Fiction. Memoir. Poetry. It's weird, he texted once. I never realized how many stories have people like me in them. And how they're never the hero. That one stung a little. Because I wanted to hate him, and it's easier to hate someone who stays oblivious. But growth? That complicates things. Meanwhile, the book club had become my second family. We met every Tuesday like clockwork. Even when Marcy's husband went into surgery, even when Sheila sprained her ankle slipping on ice outside the bakery, even when Milton's nephew got arrested for punching a parking meter, he swore it was a statement on capitalism. We read, we drank, we healed. And they, these messy, wonderful people, held space for me in a way no one ever had. When I told them I was writing a full memoir, they didn't blink. They just asked when they could pre-order. Nora helped me format it. She knew a guy who'd self-published a guide on urban composting and made enough in royalties to buy a used Subaru. She said, if Pete the Compost King can do it, you can too. So I uploaded the manuscript. Titled it, Budget Bride, Full Price Soul. I didn't tell Julian. But I knew he'd find it. The day it went live, I walked to the bookstore downtown, the one I used to hide in when Julian and I fought, and just stood in the nonfiction section, breathing in paper and possibility. 2 days later, I found a review on the book's page. No profile picture. No name. Just a 5-star rating and a single sentence. I never knew someone could bleed onto a page so quietly. I knew it was him. Things between us stayed neutral. No big talks. No messy tears. Just two people with a shared past learning how to let go of the version of themselves they used to be. He didn't ask for a second chance. I didn't offer one. Instead, we existed in a soft silence, one that didn't ache, didn't beg, just was. Then, one evening, I found another box on my porch. No note. Just items, a photo from our wedding, me laughing with cake on my nose. My college notebook, filled with poetry I'd forgotten I wrote. A printed email from Selena. At first, I wasn't going to read it. But curiosity is louder than pain, sometimes. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Not really. He talked about you like you were this cold wall. I never knew you were bleeding behind it. I would have left sooner if I had. You don't have to believe me. I wouldn't either. But I'm trying to make different choices now. Just wanted to say that. I didn't know how to feel. Not forgiveness. Not fury. Just closure. The kind that doesn't come with fireworks. Just a quiet exhale. I started doing readings. Small ones. Local coffee shops. Libraries. Once, at a high school writing class where half the kids spent more time on their phones than listening, but one girl came up after and whispered, "Your story sounds like my mom's." She just left, too. That made it worth it. Everything, the humiliation, the silence, the crown, the storm, it had turned into something else. Not pride. Not revenge. But purpose. A way out, not just for me, but maybe for someone else. Julian came to one of the readings. Sat in the back. Didn't say a word. Afterward, he left a note on the chair where he'd been sitting. It said, "You were always the story." I was just the footnote I thought was the main plot. I stared at that note for a long time after everyone had left the room. You were always the story. I was just the footnote I thought was the main plot. There was something painfully poetic in it, a kind of sad self-awareness that Julian never used to have. It hit me in a weird spot. Not because I missed him, but because I finally recognized how deeply we both had lied to ourselves. He lied to me, sure, but I lied to myself just as often. Lied that things would get better. Lied that I wasn't lonely. Lied that surviving counted as loving. That note didn't change anything in terms of what I wanted from him. I still didn't want a reconciliation. But it chipped away at something I'd been carrying. That old voice that whispered, maybe it was my fault. Maybe I didn't try hard enough. Because the truth is, I did try. I tried until I bent myself into a version of a wife that made other people comfortable and me invisible. And now? I was fully visible. To myself. To everyone who read my words. And, maybe, finally, to him. About a month after the book came out, I got invited to speak at a community center event for women leaving emotionally abusive relationships. They called it Starting Over, Stories from the Other Side. The irony didn't escape me, that I, someone who once felt so stuck and voiceless, was now being handed a microphone. But I showed up, manuscript in hand, throat tight with nerves. I shared the birthday story, the crown, the card, the way I laughed while wanting to disappear into the floor. There were gasps in the room. A few murmurs. One woman clutched a tissue the entire time. Afterward, they lined up to speak to me. One woman, maybe in her early 60s, said, "I wore a tiara too." Mine said Mrs. Finally. I didn't know until years later it was more of a joke than a celebration. A younger woman, maybe 22, whispered, "I saw myself in your story." I just broke up with someone who called me a practice run for the kind of woman he actually wanted to marry. Your book made me leave. That one nearly broke me. I hugged her. Tight. Because I knew exactly what it felt like to be reduced to a placeholder in your own love story. Somewhere in all of this, Julian's father reached out. He'd read the book too. Left a voicemail on my old number, the one I barely used anymore, just for spam and utilities. He said, "I didn't protect you from her. From my wife. And I should have. You deserved more than what we gave." It wasn't emotional. It wasn't flowery. Just honest. For a family that had built its reputation on performance and pretty lies, that honesty was shocking. But I appreciated it. Even if I didn't quite know what to do with it. Julian and I saw each other occasionally. Not by design. Asheville's not a big town. He'd nod. I'd nod. Once, at the farmer's market, he passed me a bag of peaches and said, "Best for cobbler." "You used to like making that." I said, "Still do." It was simple. Clean. Not painful anymore. Because some people aren't meant to be your forever. They're meant to be your awakening. And that's what Julian was, my storm. My signal flare. My reminder that being loved isn't the same as being valued. One rainy Tuesday, book club met at Sheila's house because her roof finally got fixed and she insisted on hosting. She made too much pasta, Marcy brought cheap sangria, and Milton came in a velvet vest that made us all feel underdressed. We sat in a circle, passing around printouts of my latest draft, a follow-up piece I was working on, centered on identity after emotional abandonment. Not the kind of stuff publishers salivate over, but the kind of stuff that matters. They didn't critique much. Instead, we talked. About the men we had been expected to save. The versions of ourselves we had to abandon just to survive our 20s. About how we were slowly building lives from scraps of what we thought was failure, but was really just becoming. It was the kind of night that made you forget the ache, even if just for a few hours. And as I walked out to my car, arms full of leftovers and encouragement, I saw another envelope tucked under my windshield. No name. Just a drawing. A little cartoon crown. Inside was a page torn from one of my books. My own words, underlined in blue, "Sometimes it's not about the apology. It's about the person finally realizing what they did, long after you needed them to." Julian again. Probably. I didn't call him. Didn't text. Didn't acknowledge it in any way. I just went home, placed the note in my writing drawer with the others, and sat down to keep typing. Because I wasn't done telling the story. Not yet. It was early spring in Asheville. The dogwoods were blooming and the sky had shifted from winter's steel gray to soft, uncertain blue. The kind of blue that still carried a chill, but made you hope anyway. I'd started hosting small writing workshops at the public library. Nothing major, 10 people in a circle, notebooks open, pens ready. Some were teenagers, one was a grandmother writing letters to her younger self. All of them carried some kind of story that had been stuffed in a drawer, hidden behind obligation, or left unfinished in the shadow of someone louder. The first session, I opened with a prompt: write about the first time you realized you mattered more than their opinion. Everyone was quiet. Then pens started moving. And I knew, right then, this was what I wanted to do. Not just write, but help others do the same. Especially the ones who had been convinced that their voices were too much, or not enough. It was around this time that Julian showed up again. Not at my house. Not at a reading. At Nora's front door. I was staying there temporarily while my own apartment was undergoing some repairs. Nora opened the door, saw his face, and wordlessly handed me the mug she was holding before walking back inside. She didn't even say hi to him. Julian looked lighter. Not happy. But different. Like a man who had carried a burden so long it became part of his posture, and now, without it, was trying to figure out how to stand. He held something in his hand, a black leather notebook. The kind you gift someone who wants to seem put together. This is weird, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. But I've been writing. Since reading your book. I raised a brow. He held it out. I'm not giving this to you. Just wanted you to know. I didn't take it. That wasn't my burden to carry. Instead, I said, why? Julian looked at me for a long moment before answering. Because I finally realized how quiet you got near the end. And I hated that I didn't notice sooner. Writing's been the only thing that shuts down the part of my brain that still thinks silence means peace. I didn't know what to say to that. It was honest. Unpolished. The kind of thing I'd once begged him to be. He left after a few minutes. Didn't linger. Didn't ask for anything. He just looked at me like someone remembering the exact moment they dropped something precious, and could still hear it shatter, even years later. 2 days after that, I got a message from someone I hadn't heard from in years, Dana. Back in college, she and I had been inseparable, dorm room talks until 3 a.m., handwritten letters slid under each other's doors, the kind of friendship that feels like home. But we drifted. Life. Men. Distance. And at some point, I realized she'd stopped responding, and I stopped reaching out. Her message was short. Hey. I just read your book. I cried in the middle of an Amtrak ride and had to pretend I was allergic to something. I'm proud of you. Let's talk soon. And we did. For 5 hours. She told me about her divorce. Her move back to Cincinnati. Her therapist. The way she almost didn't finish my book because she was scared it would remind her of all the things she let slide. All the pieces of herself she handed over in exchange for stability. I thought it would be about you, she said. But it was about me. I hate that, but also, thank you. I started hearing that more and more. In emails. At readings. During workshops. People saw themselves in my pain, and instead of turning away, they stayed. Sat with it. Sat with me. I wasn't writing a memoir anymore. I was building mirrors. One afternoon, while sorting through my notebooks, I found a list I had written back when I was 26. Tucked inside the pages of an old journal, it was titled, When I Finally Leave, I Want. It read, Silence Without Fear. My own bookshelf. To make dinner for one without sadness. To sleep in the middle of the bed. To be proud of what I survived. I read it 3 times. Then a 4th. And then I cried, for her. For that girl. For the version of me who thought she'd never make it out. Who thought love was earned through quiet, and peace was a reward you got after bending far enough. I hung the list above my writing desk. A reminder that I had arrived where I once only dreamed of being. The next time I saw Julian, it was accidental. I was buying flowers, peonies, my favorite, from a street vendor near Pack Square. He was walking out of a coffee shop with a woman I didn't recognize. Tall, short brown hair, linen dress. They were laughing. He saw me. I saw him. Neither of us flinched. Just a nod. A brief, mutual acknowledgement. That was it. And it was enough. There was no bitterness. No lingering ache. Just space. The kind that blooms after something ends. Not a clean end. Not a tied-up in-about finish. But the kind that feels open, honest. Human. He didn't follow me. I didn't watch them walk away. I bought my flowers, tucked them into my bag, and went home. Later that evening, I placed them in a tall, chipped vase I found at a yard sale. The petals opened fully by morning. That night, as I settled in to write, I opened a fresh document on my laptop. Title: The Woman After. The cursor blinked. I took a deep breath. Then I started typing. Because some stories don't end where the relationship does. Some stories begin after everything breaks. Some stories, the best ones, are what you write when you finally remember your voice. At least, not the kind we imagine: scorched earth, public humiliation, angry confrontations with carefully rehearsed monologues. I didn't need that. Because sometimes, the most powerful revenge is building a life someone never believed you were capable of having. And then letting them watch. 6 months after the book launch, I got an email from a small independent press in Raleigh. They wanted to publish Budget Bride, full-price soul in paperback, give it national distribution, and sponsor a book tour through the Southeast. They said the sales numbers had been surprisingly strong for a debut memoir. I said yes without hesitation. The day I signed the contract, I called Nora and screamed so loud she thought I'd won the lottery. Then she screamed. Then her cats scattered like bowling pins. It wasn't just about the money, or the recognition. It was about proof. That the girl once mocked for being cheap, for being less than, for not having polish or pedigree, could tell her story and have it echo. I didn't announce the tour right away. I wanted to keep it quiet for as long as I could. But Asheville was one of the cities. Of course it was. When the local bookstore put up the poster, it had my face on it, not in a glamorous, overdone way. Just me. Holding a coffee mug. Looking out the window like someone who finally saw clearly. Julian saw it. I know because the day before the event, I got an envelope in my P.O. box. Inside was a check for $317. No note. Nothing else. Just a number scrawled in the memo line: what I owed you for your birthday. Plus interest. I laughed. Loudly. Because it was so Julian. Still trying to control the narrative in his own way. Still thinking redemption was transactional. I didn't cash it. I framed it. It now hangs above my desk, right next to the glittery crown he once made me wear, now relettered by me to say, they thought she was a joke. The night of the bookstore event was surreal. Standing in front of rows of people, some friends, some strangers, some in tears before I'd even started, I felt more alive than I had in years. I shared a few pages from the book. I answered questions. I listened as people told me their stories. And then I signed copies until my wrist hurt. Halfway through, I noticed him. Julian. Standing in the back. Not in the shadows. Not trying to hide. Just watching. He didn't interrupt. Didn't come up to speak. He stood there, arms crossed, eyes not leaving the stage. He watched every second of me thriving. And I let him. Because that was the revenge. Not anger. Not cruelty. Witness. Let him see the woman he tried to shrink take up space. Let him see what I looked like when I wasn't apologizing. Let him hear applause meant for me. Let him carry the weight of everything he missed. Later that night, as I packed up my books, the store manager handed me a note. "He asked me to give you this," she said with a shrug. I unfolded it. Julian's handwriting. Neat, familiar. "You were never discounted. I just never knew how to value what I didn't understand. You outgrew me. You outgrew everything. I get it now. And I'm glad. I hope one day someone loves you the way you always deserved. I hope it's you." No request. No manipulation. Just acknowledgement. It was the first time his words didn't twist in my chest. A year later, I released my second book. The Woman After. It didn't hit the bestseller list. It didn't get a movie deal. But it landed. In hearts. In living rooms. In quiet moments when women stared at themselves in the mirror and said, "I want more." And I kept going. Not because I had something to prove anymore, but because I finally knew what it meant to live for me. Julian eventually moved to Durham, started working for a nonprofit. We didn't stay in touch. I heard through a mutual friend that he'd started dating someone quiet. Low drama, apparently. I smiled when I heard that. Because I used to think being low drama was the goal. Now I know it's just another word people use when they mean silent. Convenient. Contained. I wasn't any of those things anymore. One evening, I was walking downtown with a coffee in one hand and a tote full of edits in the other when a woman stopped me on the sidewalk. "Excuse me," she said, breathless. "Are you?" I nodded before she finished. "I just wanted to say thank you. Your book, it gave me the strength to leave after 20 years. I didn't know how to say I was miserable until I saw the words printed in front of me." I hugged her. Because that is what revenge looks like now. Not a broken man crying in the rain. Not a fight won through clever words or mic drops.